This surgeon kills people instead of saving them. The movie starts as we witness a cop racing to the hospital with his partner, barely making it. Inside, Dr. Paul Kersey tends to the fallen officer, but unfortunately, there's little he can do. The diagnosis is death. Despite feeling guilty, the cop knows he did his best. A nurse calls for Paul. He must now attend to the shooter. As he leaves, the officer scoffs. "So you're going to save that monster now?" "Yes, he will." At home, Paul checks his broken watch while chatting with his wife Lucy. Suddenly, they hear a delighted scream upstairs from their daughter Jordan. Could she have a visitor? Jordan descends, composed at first, then explodes with joy. She's been accepted to her dream college. They couldn't be prouder. At Jordan's soccer game later on, tensions rise as one of the parents becomes belligerent, shouting at the referee and using foul language. Paul intervenes, advising him to calm down and suggesting he needs a chill pill. The man retaliates, expressing a desire to settle things with his fists. A confrontation nearly ensues, but Lucy intervenes, shielding the reserved Paul from harm. Following the game, they head out for lunch, filled with anticipation for Jordan's college journey. However, Paul's brother Frank proposes that Jordan should learn martial arts to protect herself from unwanted advances from boys, specifically mentioning beta males. Jordan surprises them by demonstrating her Krav Maga skills, impressively choking Frank, who seems to admire her abilities. It turns out she's been training weekly, much to everyone's surprise. Outside the restaurant, Frank approaches Paul, requesting $2,000 to settle some debts. In the past, he faced a criminal conviction, which made finding a job challenging. Being the supportive brother he is, Paul accepts. Then, a valet arrives, and Frank jests that Paul's the one loaded with cash. While it's merely a casual remark for Frank, the valet takes it seriously, scrutinizing Paul and his family, presuming they live a prosperous and content life. As time passes, the family gets ready to celebrate Jordan's birthday. However, Paul receives a work call, requiring his immediate attention. Though it's disappointing, the ladies understand. To lift their spirits, they opt for some retail therapy. Lucy plans to surprise Jordan with a homemade cake, but needs her iPad first. Jordan goes upstairs to fetch it, only to find it missing. Lucy's suspicions rise when she notices an open window and dirty footprints inside. Suddenly, Jordan screams, and the harsh reality hits them. 3 ominous masked intruders have invaded their home and taken them hostage. The leader, Knox, pressures Lucy to guide him to the safe, leaving Jordan in the company of Joe and Fish. Lucy finds it challenging to open the safe under duress, while Jordan's discomfort around Fish grows. Tensions rise further as an argument erupts between Fish and his partner, with the latter urging Fish to concentrate and refrain from fooling around. Jordan seizes the opportunity and attacks with a knife, while Lucy swiftly follows suit by throwing boiling water at Fish. In retaliation, the men open fire. At the hospital, Paul is alerted to 2 new victims. Rushing to check on them, he's stopped in his tracks, realizing the grim reality. Racing to Lucy's side, he finds her lifeless. Meanwhile, Jordan lies in a coma. Paul later meets with detectives Kevin Raines and Leonore Jackson, who launch an investigation into Lucy's murder. He attends Lucy's funeral with her family, finding solace in their support. As they ride together, Lucy's father spots poachers and attempts to chase them away, illustrating the need to defend what's theirs. Struggling to sleep, Paul seeks therapy to cope with his trauma and insomnia. He grapples with feelings of failure for not being there when his family needed him most. Uncertain of the path ahead, he continues to check in with the police department about his case. Fortunately, he arrives just as Kevin is getting water and gets buzzed in without an appointment. Kevin has a waffle of sticky notes, open cases left unanswered for months. Despite this, Kevin assures Paul that his case is different since it wasn't gang-related. However, Paul feels even more powerless. One night, he decides to go for a walk and intervenes when he notices 2 thugs harassing a woman. They turn their attention to him and beat him up badly before leaving him lying on the street. During his recovery, Paul sees an ad on TV for a gun store and considers purchasing a weapon. He goes to the store and speaks to Bethany, who explains the process of getting a gun in America. Though he takes note of all the security cameras and the traceability of the gun and its bullets back to him, Paul decides against buying one. Another day at the hospital brings another gunshot victim, but this time, the thug drops a Glock. Paul quickly kicks it under the bed, somehow managing to bring it home undetected, where he proceeds to learn how it works. Overlaid with his day job, by day, he saves lives. By night, he's preparing to take them. One night, he checks up on Jordan and learns her condition has worsened. She's having seizures now. Strapped to the bed as a precaution, Paul notes the irony. His daughter is essentially handcuffed while her attackers roam free. Feeling a sense of urgency, Paul dons a hoodie and heads out looking for trouble. He witnesses a carjacking, and when the thugs assault a man and take his girlfriend, Paul shouts out. They respond with bullets, and Paul returns fire, causing the car to crash. The kickback cuts his hand, but he continues, knowing someone is recording him. The video becomes a viral hit as one of the carjackers stumbles out of the car and begins firing sporadically. Paul waits for the perfect shot, then takes him out. He checks on the driver, who's fine, before the detectives arrive on the scene hours later. After speaking to the witness who recorded the incident, they learn the video was indeed a viral hit. At home, Paul sees his handiwork for himself and is pleased. The next day, while driving to work, Paul tunes into the radio, where they're all talking about his heroic vigilante ways. They even dub him the Grim Reaper at work. Paul tends to a boy who's been shot in the leg. The boy reveals that the so-called ice cream man did it to him because he refused to sell, though he wasn't talking about sweet treats. Paul assures him everything will be fine and checks the boy's address. True to his word, Paul pulls up to the turf with Chief Keef blaring in the background. He finds the street name and goes to confront the ice cream man, introducing himself as his last customer before dumping his load all over the man's chest. The reaction is mixed. Some think vigilantes are cringe, while others see it as based. Kevin and his partner arrive on the scene and spot some kids reenacting the incident. Kevin notices the boy is shooting with his left hand, an interesting detail. Reviewing the Reaper's footage, Kevin discovers the mystery man is indeed left-handed. Back at work, another gunshot victim is brought in, and this time it's Miguel, whom Paul recognizes from his tattoo. While using a defibrillator on him, Paul notices a rather familiar watch. It's his. Curious, Paul takes Miguel's phone from the paramedics and unlocks it with his thumb. Inside, he finds a picture of his address, along with evidence that stolen items from the safe are being sold at a pawn shop. Paul pays a visit to the pawn shop and speaks to the owner, Ponytail, dropping Miguel's name. This raises Ponytail's suspicions. As he circles around Paul, Ponytail notices that his hoodie has a morgue tag on it, a red flag. Ponytail casually texts Fish, alerting him to the doctor's surprise visit. Paul asks Ponytail if he has any watches, and Ponytail says yes, reaching for an oddly gun-shaped one. Sensing danger, Paul attacks, stabbing Ponytail's hand and forcing him to take him to his belongings. He leads Paul to the back to find his stuff, but moments later, Fish shows up and attempts to shoot Paul. In a swift move, Paul shoots Ponytail instead, a certified bra moment. Paul and Fish exchange gunfire, but then Paul's gun jams. Fortunately, Fish slips on some water, and Paul feels a sudden musical inspiration. Fish flees, but just as he's about to taste freedom, Paul manages to tag his leg. Fish tries to give up Joe, revealing he works at a local auto shop. Suddenly, Fish attacks Paul, stunning him and accidentally firing a shot. The bullet hits a bowling ball, which begins to roll. Fish closes in, but fate intervenes, and he gets bonked. Paul ensures to collect the hard drives before fleeing the scene. At home, he watches a tutorial on how to destroy the data inside, thinking this would be the best way ahead. At work, Paul receives a visit from the detectives. There's been a break in the case. A man named Fish got fried, and they found the pawn shop with all his stuff. Of course, Paul already knows all this, but he acts surprised anyway. Afterward, Paul goes to the garage where Joe works. Joe rudely tells Paul he's closed, so Paul grabs a wrench and hits his off button. He then places Joe into the car, which is being propped up by a crowbar. Putting his surgeon expertise to good use, Paul soon gets Joe to spill the beans. Joe reveals that Knox was the mastermind behind the whole thing, but he isn't someone who is easily found. Apparently, he finds you. With all the information he needs, Paul delivers a sick one-liner. That was off the chain, yo, before yanking the chain and condemning Joe to a car coffin. Meanwhile, the detectives pay Frank a visit. They think he's the Reaper. He's left-handed, has motive, and not such a clean record. We cut to Paul chilling with Jordan as usual. She's not very talkative. He receives a text from an unknown number threatening to reveal the truth about him. The phone rings. It's Knox. He invites Paul to meet him at a club, but not so they can dance. Fearing for his brother, Frank checks in on Paul, but he doesn't seem to be home. Frank lets himself in and stumbles upon Paul's mess of a basement. He spots bullets and realizes what's really going on. Back to Paul. He arrives at the club and is told to meet at the bathroom. Inside, he calls the phone and takes aim, unloading while everyone else runs away in fear. The stall opens. It's empty. Suddenly, Knox appears from behind. firing away and protected by a human shield. Paul takes cover but doesn't fire back, fearing for the innocent. Using his 200 IQ, he spots an electrical box and shoots it out. In the cover of darkness, Paul flees. In the aftermath, Knox ends up in the hospital, and the detectives arrive to question him. He says he knows who the shooter was. Before he reveals the name, we come back to Paul dealing with his own injuries. Through sheer will, he manages to patch up his own wound. Meanwhile, the detectives burst into Paul's empty office. Paul is, in fact, headed towards his basement, where he runs into Frank. The pair have a heart-to-heart. Of course, Frank wants him to put an end to it all and focus on doing what's best for Jordan. Then the police come knocking. Frank answers the door and makes up an alibi for Paul. They have no choice but to leave. Back in the basement, the brothers continue to chat when Paul receives a call. Jordan woke up finally. Paul rushes over and unfortunately has to break the news about her mother. On the bright side, Jordan is physically well and can come home soon. A week later, Paul and Jordan head for the elevator. Just as the doors are about to close, Knox enters. While he recognizes them, Paul remains unaware as he never saw Knox's face. Knox engages in casual conversation with Jordan before addressing Paul by name as they depart. Following this encounter, Paul promptly visits Bethany to exercise his American freedoms. Following Jordan's return home, Knox makes a return to the house accompanied by two other goons. Jordan takes refuge in the closet as Paul confronts them. Utilizing his exceptional skills, Paul dispatches the two goons, but Knox remains elusive. Paul inspects the basement, only to be ambushed by Knox. As Jordan panics, she emerges from hiding and rushes over. Knox's attention diverted, Paul capitalizes on the opportunity. He uncovers a hidden compartment beneath a table, revealing a large gun, and proceeds to unload on Knox, putting an end to the threat. After the detectives arrive on the scene, Kevin talks to Paul about what happened, questioning him about the guns. Although Paul's story is clearly suspicious, Kevin decides to make up a story that Knox returned because he thought Jordan would identify him. Later on, Paul drops Jordan off at college. On his way out, he notices a man who just committed a robbery. He calls to the man and pretends to shoot him with his fingers. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more such videos.